Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, today we are welcoming Parijat Deshpande. She's an author, speaker, and the CEO of a global boutique company dedicated to reducing pregnancy complications and ending preterm birth. She has served hundreds of women through her programs and her work one-on-one, helping them manage pregnancy complications and reclaim a safety and trust in their bodies that they thought was eroded forever. After her own experience with high-risk pregnancy, she went from patient to practitioner to help other women beat the statistics, a journey she chronicled in her best-selling book, Pregnancy Brain, a mind-body approach to stress management during high-risk pregnancy. Today, she continues to take a trauma-informed neurological approach to reproductive health to help her concierge-level private clients improve pregnancy outcomes after preterm birth or late-term loss. She continues to consult with progressive companies, organizations, and brands on how to best support their pregnant employees and leadership team through infertility and high-risk pregnancy and possible NICU stays. As an educator and keynote speaker, she trains medical providers, birth workers, and allied professionals around the country on how to provide trauma-sensitive support as they work with their prenatal patients to help them increase trust in their care. She also partners with production companies, directors, producers, screenwriters to accurately represent birth trauma, loss, risk pregnancy, and preterm birth in TV and film. Parijat is the host of the popular podcast Delivering Miracles, which discusses the real raw side of family building, infertility, loss, high risk pregnancy, bed rest, prematurity, and healing once a baby comes home. When she isn't working on the end of high risk pregnancy crisis, she can be found hiking, reading British crime novels, singing, and composing pieces on the piano. I am so looking forward to this conversation because this overlaps with so much of the stories that I've shared of my own experience as well. So I'm really looking forward to diving in. Welcome, Parijat, to the show. And I apologize again if I messed up your name. So do you want to say it properly for everybody who's listening?
Sure. No, but you said it great. It's Parijat.
Okay. And give a quick intro from what you feel that you're kind of bringing to the table right now in your practice more than anything, because I did do your intro and it covers a lot for people that are listening. What lights you up the most out of all of those things with your work?
Oh gosh, it's so hard to pick because it's all of it, honestly. But I think if I had to summarize it all under one umbrella, it would be filling the gaps that are left by the medical system and the mental health system for people who are trying to conceive and are going through pregnancy, especially people who are going through infertility and high risk pregnancies and really having to fight for growing their families.
Right.
I think filling those gaps is really just what keeps me going, burns that fire every single day.
Awesome. And for you, I know you said in your bio again that you had a high risk pregnancy. Did you also go through any fertility struggles, or was that because a lot of people, it's not one and the same? They may struggle with fertility and then have a great pregnancy, or vice versa. It's not necessarily one and the same for anybody who's listening. I don't want you to think that, oh, just because I'm maybe struggling through my fertility journey means I'm going to have a high risk pregnancy. That is not the case at all. So, what was your story there?
Yeah, it's I went through the whole gamut of it. I went through
Okay.
primary and secondary infertility, multiple losses, a very high risk pregnancy, an extremely preterm delivery, and a lengthy NICU stay. So,
So sorry.
yeah, I mean, thank you, but yeah, that was just our journey, and we really had to fight every step of the way to bring these kids home.
Mm,
And I think I love that you mentioned that it doesn't mean necessarily that if you have one the other will follow, because
Right.
that's very true. That I think
Right.
it's scary to hear stories like mine sometimes where you go, "Oh my gosh, all these things can go wrong in one
Right.
person." But it's not necessarily the case. That just happens to be my story.
Right. And I think that that's also important to note too, because there's, we hear and see so much. And that's part of the work that I do with the subconscious mind, right? Is that we might hear something or read something or see something, and then we take that in of, oh my goodness, that's going to be my story in some way. And we're much more informed than we ever have been in the past, for better or worse, but those things also kind of stick with us, again, for better or worse. And I think taking away from conversations like this of just being informed of, for you and or friends or family that may be going through this sort of stuff, to understand, okay, I know what to do next. I know that there's people out there that can help support us through this process. And you don't have to go through this alone, because I know when we didn't take our baby home, that was the worst thing ever. But then I also could think of something worse for people that have gone through this, right? That literally never got to take their baby home from NICU, right? So, and that doesn't matter. I always say that too, right? We're not comparing stories. It's not
Mhm.
whose pain was worse and whatever, because you're justified in the way that you feel, and being sad for that experience. And I think that's part of grieving the process of having that easy conception, having the easy pregnancy, having the easy birth story, et cetera, right? So let's dive into your story and how you got to be what you're doing today.
Sure. Well, when I was a really young child, I actually wanted to be an OBGYN. That was something that I knew from very early on. My best friend's father is still practicing as an OBGYN. And I just loved everything that he talked about and all the work that he did. Then I met chemistry in college and we realized we were not compatible, only to find out later. It probably would have been okay, but I just decided not to do that. So my career path kind of took a different turn, and I was focused on developmental psychology, doing a lot of work with children, toddlers, babies. It was so wonderful, and I really thought that's where I would end up. But then, with another turn, ended up in clinical psychology. And there was a lot of pull, I kind of in the back of my head of, I'm not doing enough in that women's health space and that reproductive health space. I really want to do more, but I was so early in my career. I figured I'll figure it out, until I entered life university, basically, and went through. My first pregnancy ended in a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, and
Mm,
that is, if for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, is when the embryo implants outside of the uterus, which is a life-threatening emergency. For me, it implanted in my fallopian tube, and that was the first time I had experienced that. I was aware that it might be difficult to get pregnant. I have some health issues that we knew might affect fertility, but we had heard of some friends who had had miscarriages, so we're kind of aware, like, this could happen. But it was
right.
the first time that I had a personal experience of, "Oh, this could be threatening to my life." I never, ever, it never crossed my mind
Were
that
you
that would
able to
be.
keep that tube?
No, mm-mm.
No. Okay.
No, I had emergency surgery and they had to remove
Okay.
everything. And after that, I think we just went into this whole process so much more fearful,
Right.
because now all of a sudden the hypotheticals were becoming real lived experiences.
For sure.
So, I did get pregnant with my first round of IVF with my son,
Right.
and that was a pregnancy that ended up being high risk. So I ended up with 8 complications in that pregnancy, and he was born at 24 weeks and 5 days,
Oh my gosh. So
and
sorry.
then the NICU journey began.
So when did you realize in your pregnancy that you were high risk? Was it right
It
away?
was right away.
Okay.
First I developed what's called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which they are doing a much better job of reducing, because we're doing more frozen embryo transfers than fresh embryo transfers. And so it was actually in the middle of treatment for OHSS that I found out I was pregnant.
Okay.
And from there, it just snowballed. Every few weeks, a new complication was arising.
Mm.
I was put on modified activity restrictions at home at like 6 weeks. I was bleeding the whole time, had a subchorionic hemorrhage, and then multiple other complications after that.
Okay. So,
So,
just to stop there, again, for people that are listening, the overstimulation, we often hear about that with people that are doing egg retrievals before their fertilization because, as she was saying, that it's not usually as common anymore to go from stimulating to doing the transfer right away because a lot of people now are testing their embryos as well. So they get them tested, come back and do that. The SCH, which is the subchronic hematoma, is very, very common also. I have a lot of clients that go through their whole pregnancies with the SCH. So there are times where it can be a complication, and there's also times where I call it's just your little friend that's along for the ride. It's fine. It's not hurting the baby. It's not hurting you. It's scary because it's causing bleeding, sometimes more than less. And no matter what you do, whether you're on bed rest or not, it just has a life of its own, really. So I just want to put that as the PSA that you'll hear that a lot with friends and family and maybe yourselves. But those things don't necessarily mean, again, that it's going to cause any sort of problem. It could, depending on where they are, but most of the time they're more common than not, unfortunately, especially if you've gone through an IVF journey.
exactly.
Okay, go ahead.
So I ended up on hospital bed rest at
Mm.
22 weeks and 4 days. Um, and it was around that time that my medical team was preparing us to lose the baby.
Oh
There
my
were so
gosh.
many complications that had developed, and we were just in that periviable stage. And,
Mm.
we were hearing all the horrible statistics of what could happen. They didn't think I would stay pregnant for much longer than, 48, 72 hours or so.
And because of which one exactly? The SCH or what were they saying, all of that, like that?
I had gone into preterm labor at that
Oh,
point.
you did, okay.
Yeah.
Just because, like, no, for what reason did they say?
When I went back and looked, and I had multiple second and third opinion appointments after my son was born, and
Okay.
after a little while, we talked to multiple reproductive endocrinologists and MFMs, and there was no one reason. The pregnancy was just
Interesting.
riddled with complications, and it was just kind of the perfect storm of too many things going wrong,
Okay.
that they couldn't point to one specific thing.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
How scary though to get that feeling, I guess. So was it a feeling at that time that you were in preterm labor, or did you go to the doctor and they said, "Oh, by the way, you're in preterm labor"? How did that go down?
I was feeling the contractions for quite some time, for several
Okay.
weeks prior to ending up in the hospital, and the reason I ended up in the hospital is because I lost my mucus plug at home
Oh,
that night.
okay.
And it was the first time that I ever experienced that, but you just kind of know, like, this is bad. Something
Right.
happened and I don't think it's supposed to happen right now.
Right.
And the on-call doctor at the time, had when I called in, they said, "Well, there's nothing we can do. Just stay home and go talk to your doctor the next morning."
Mhm.
Something about that felt very wrong to me, and
Uh-huh.
so we went anyway. We went to labor and delivery and said, "Something's wrong, please
Right.
help." And I
Yes. Good
walked
for
in,
you.
and the next time I walked out was when my son was in the NICU.
Okay. And so this is at 22 weeks, you say?
Mhm.
Okay. Again, every country has different laws, rules, whatever you want to call them, based on the the gestational age of a baby and the hospital and the care for that baby. Were you aware of that? Did they educate you on anything when they said, "Okay, you're in preterm labor. What is this going to mean for your son?"
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
how did that go? I mean, I can't even imagine emotionally what you guys are going through at that time.
Yeah, first it was this happened all in the middle of the night, so the next morning, was my OB and my MFM, the maternal fetal medicine specialist. They both came in to see me. They did an ultrasound, and then they talked to me about what it would mean to deliver at 22 weeks, or right around the 23 week mark.
Mhm.
And then soon after that, the neonatologist from the NICU came and talked about what it would mean developmentally for the child and for survival rates. Even I mean, we were having some really
Of
blunt
course.
conversations about what this
Yes.
could mean.
Right.
And, the plan essentially was, because every day at that stage matters, we were going to have a conversation every single day. What are
Right.
the risks now? What are things that are going well now? What options are now on the table that weren't on the table before? Um, and it was I was very grateful to have a team that was very open in communication. So never did I feel like they knew something that I didn't. And I
Mhm.
was also constantly asking questions
Right.
throughout the pregnancy, also had plenty of practice with that with the fertility treatments. And so just
Mm.
kind of pulled that over into the
Right.
pregnancy. Um, and they always made us feel like we had a choice, and that choice would be honored without judgment, whatever it is that we chose.
That's great. And so you had a C-section at that no, you actually did a vaginal delivery?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it was, very quick. It was Nobody was prepared. I had been stable for a couple of days, and so everyone kinda thought, "Hey, maybe we'll make it to 25 weeks," and that's when we can start talking about different treatment plans and what our options are there. And then within minutes, I went from "Everything's fine" to "He's born."
Oh my gosh, so scary.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's born, obviously, they take him right away to
Yep.
NICU. This is also something I talk about with a lot of people is checking beforehand, assuming that you have a healthy pregnancy and everything's going well, but it is important to know what type of NICU
Mhm.
your hospital has. Not all of them are created equally. And so if this is something that you think in your mind, I just want to be in the best place for my baby when they're born, period, end of story. Ask your hospital what type of level they have for a NICU. Um, Not to say that anything's going to go wrong, but if you want to just be prepared for that, I know a lot of people have home births, and there's all kinds of ways that people want to be prepared. So, just putting it out there, not all NICUs are created equally. Not all hospitals have the staff that are there. So, going into it, I assume that you delivered at a hospital that they knew was gonna be prepared and ready to take you guys
Yeah.
as soon as he was born.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
So he could stay there, or did he have to go to a children's hospital right away?
No, he stayed there for several months, and then it was
Okay.
only at the very end, of his stay that we did have to move because there was the potential need for surgery, which we were able to avoid, but we didn't know that at the time.
Okay.
So that was the only reason we moved at the end.
Okay. And then when you delivered there, I I'm curious because the nurses and the doctors and everybody from our experience were always amazing. And I'm going to assume that yours were too, based on what you just said
Yeah.
earlier. But at the same time, nobody's checking on your mental health, at least from our perspective. Did they do that
Mhm.
for you guys?
I think, not officially, but I think I had developed such a close relationship with my doctors and a couple of nurses that they checked on me at just human to human.
Hmm.
Just sat down. My OB actually the next morning sat on my bed and just had tears in her eyes with me. And she held my hand and she talked to me like a person. And
Oh,
I
great.
that meant so much to me.
Right.
And I had many of them, because I'd been in the hospital for 15 days. I'd gotten to know most of the staff there, and so many of them checked in on us even after they'd pop in the NICU when they knew we were there to check and see how we were doing,
Good. So
which
you felt
meant a
supported from
lot.
that way.
From
That's
that
great.
perspective, I think to ease the transition to now the NICU world, I think it was the best that they could have done.
Great.
There's always more that we need to be doing, I think, systemically, but from a human perspective, I really appreciated that.
That's fantastic. Okay, so what happens next? So your baby's there. I'm sure your heart is breaking for him and
Yep, he
um
was the sickest baby in the NICU for a couple of months. He had, we nobody would talk to us about homecoming. We were so
mm,
far out from that. That was just not a
right.
reality. So we were taking it minute by minute for almost 2 months.
Right.
Um, And then we were able to take it day by day for a little while after that. But I think
Mhm.
that really highlights the reality of the NICU is depending on what's going on, you time really warps. You can't think and plan more than a moment at a time or a day at a time, depending on what's happening with the baby. And so that became our new reality, driving back and forth from home to the NICU. And every day I spent as much time as I could there. Usually it was somewhere between 10, 12 hours a day. I was there being involved with his cares and his treatments and talking to as many people as I could because I wanted to do the same thing I did for my pregnancy, which is I don't want you to know something that I don't know. So
Right.
catch me up, talk to me, tell me what's going on, so that I
Mhm.
can make informed decisions and I can feel like I'm involved in the
Right.
whole process.
And were you able to have time that you could hold him and stuff, or was he purely like you
It
couldn't
was a little over 3 weeks before I could hold him.
okay.
Yeah.
I think again, it's such a weird concept not having any insight into NICU, and I hope everyone listening to this never has to because
Hmm.
it's such a strange experience. It's almost like the twilight zone in a way, right? Like,
Yeah.
is this really happening? Is this
Yeah.
really my life? And you see all the other families that are there and you're like wondering what their story is and
Yeah.
like it's so strange and you say like minute to minute, day by day, and then when you think something's going well and then it
Yeah.
doesn't and you get hopeful and then you get scared. I remember us saying to the doctor, "Oh, we can't take him home." Like
Mhm.
they had said, "Okay, I think he's ready to go." And I was like, "We're not ready to go." Like
Yeah.
what if he can't breathe? And, what are we
Yeah.
supposed to do with that? And, they kind of said, "Oh, well, you have 2 other kids, so you're comfortable with this." And I was like, "No, I am
This
not
is
comfortable with."
different.
Yes. Yeah. And we were lucky enough that our hospital was able to let him stay a couple more days till he got more stable. But I think that that whole experience is not something that I would ever want anybody to have to know about, but at the same time, I also think it's good to have some insight of what happens, how does
Yeah.
it work, who's there. Y I will say, again, in our situation, the nurses in the NICU, the doctors in the NICU were the best people on the
Yeah.
planet,
Mhm.
angels sent from Earth to or sent to Earth to help these families and
Yeah.
these babies. It's literally blows my mind. I get goosebumps thinking about that.
Yeah.
Um, but being there day to day for you, how did that wear on you? Did you feel empowered again because you were like part of the situation and you were learning and all of that? Or were you feeling that you're just like a fly on the wall waiting for the next update of what's happening?
No, I think I felt very empowered because I just inserted myself everywhere. Anything that was happening, I'm like, keep me in the loop. I'm right here. I'm taking
Hmm.
notes and I'm learning and all of this. But I think that was my way of coping with feeling
Sure.
completely helpless.
Right.
Feeling like I think the devastation of feeling like my pregnancy ended so early and he is now finishing out an entire trimester plus with
Right.
other people caring for him and not me was so devastating that I couldn't go there for
Right.
the entirety of his NICU stay and beyond for a long time. So I compensated for that by being really
Sure.
involved and being hands on. And so I think the impact of that, which I think is true for most NICU parents, is it comes as kind of a wave, like a cascade after the fact. Once things kind of quiet down at home, months or whatever later, and you kind of feel then the impact of how horrible that time was.
Right. Right. And so fast forward, your baby's healthy now. And was there any long-term complications that he's had from that?
Yes, I think you can't be born that early without some kind of long-term health issues. So
Mhm.
we are very lucky in that they're manageable and we're able to handle it without intensive medical care. And also, yeah, there will always be the lingering effects of being born that soon.
Yes. And so again, fast forward to when did this become something that you're like, I need to step in and help other families that are going through this. And what do you do now for anybody that is listening through this part of the journey with the high risk and the trauma informed
Yeah.
help and the NICU stays and all of that, because I think that's so important.
Thank you. Yeah, the seed was planted when I was in on hospital bed rest.
Okay.
Just feeling personally like I feel like I'm a container. I'm a vessel, and everything naturally was about, is baby okay? Is baby okay? And as you were
Mhm.
mentioning earlier, very little focused on, but how are you handling this, and how are you
Right.
doing? And specifically, what I noticed was, being in preterm labor for several weeks before I delivered, I noticed that I was able to modulate my contractions at the hospital, and they were monitored, so you could see the difference. And so the seed was planted there of just feeling like, if we survive this, I need to, my career had gone to shambles anyway. Everything had stopped because of the pregnancy. I would have had to start over essentially anyway. I feel very called to come back now, and like maybe this was my path into reproductive health. That original idea of being an OBGYN, well, maybe this is
Mm.
the way that I can better support people in this experience, because now I have the lived experience of it too.
Right.
So it took about 3 years to for us to kind of settle into a routine at home where we had less medical appointments, and there was just kind of some semblance of sort of normalcy, whatever normal even means at this point.
Right.
And that's kind of when the idea popped back up, and I went, okay, I think I want to do this. And so I studied, went back and kind of increased my specialty in psychoneuroimmunology and in somatics, and really started to understand, what is it that happened to me? How was it that I was able to manage my preterm contractions in a way that helped extend my pregnancy beyond what they thought was possible? I didn't want it to be a magical thing. I wanted to understand the science behind it. And
Right.
turns out there's 70 years of science behind why that was possible. And that just really is what turbocharged the work. And so now at Ruvelle, that's essentially what we do, is we support people who are expecting a high risk pregnancy, or are going through a high risk pregnancy, or are recovering from a high risk pregnancy. We support them through really guiding them through how to improve their somatic health, meaning their neuroendoimmune systems. We support them through their overall health and how to kind of restore health and wellness after everything that you have been through, and then how to navigate the healthcare system so that you get the best care possible and reduce the risk of medical errors.
Amazing. And I think if somebody who's listening going through this or knows somebody who is going through this, you don't underestimate the situation of how valuable it is to have somebody help you through this. I think we all think
Agreed.
like, I got this. I can do this. I'm smart. I can figure it out. I can Google my way through this or that. And it really is so much bigger than that. In the sense that you have so much going on already, right? Your nervous system is at a probably all-time high in all of the things that you're going through, and to have somebody to help you to navigate through this period to get you to the other side is invaluable in my opinion. uh,
Agreed.
and I think that asking for help is not mean that you are not able to do it yourself. Of course, I'm sure most people listening are very capable of doing it yourself. But to take that off your plate and have somebody assist you in that and say, you take the wheel on this, guide me where I need to go. You've been down this road before. I think that is huge. That's why when I got into coaching 15 plus years ago, that's kind of where it started, was from knowing that somebody could understand where I've been, right? And then the same with the fertility 7 years ago, 8 years ago. If I could stand where somebody's saying, I get you, I hear you, I see you, I know what it's like to be through this. That's a whole different ballgame, right? To be able to stand next to somebody and know that they understand what you're going through and be able to help you through it. Take the help that's there. And I think this is such a avenue that people don't even know exists still, right? We're
Yes.
still trying to educate people that yes, this is a thing. Yes, there's help for this. Yes, we don't
Exactly.
have to do this alone. And it is so invaluable. So tell your friends and family, if this is something you're going through, have a conversation with Parijat to say, this is what I need help with. I'm not even sure if I'm going to really need help all the way through. Maybe it's just you had a funky appointment and they sent you to an MFM right now and you're like, I don't know what this is even going to mean, right? Um, take that step to educate yourself with somebody else who's been through it, because any of us who have been through situations with the high risk pregnancies, and there's so many variations. Again, it doesn't mean that it's going to be terrible, or it just means it's a little different. And sometimes I tell people it could be as easy as you just have to be monitored all the way through and you get to see your
Mhm.
baby more and whatever. So as long as you can have somebody talk you through the what ifs, so you're not reeling in your head all the time of the worst case scenario, and or if that does happen, you have somebody to guide you through it and be like, okay, we got you. If this happens, this is how we're going to navigate that. And it's all going to be okay. And we're going to figure it out. And you are supported and you are loved, et cetera, et cetera. So, what advice do you have for somebody that may have has just gotten a diagnosis of having complications during pregnancy, and or has just gone through a traumatic birth?
I think I would say, if you've just gotten a diagnosis during your pregnancy, I would spend the extra time that you might be spending on Google or PubMed, like I did, and
Mhm.
instead have the conversations with your medical providers to very clearly understand what that complication means for you, what that means for your baby, what treatment options are on the table, what are off the table, and get really, really clear about what it actually means for the next steps of your pregnancy. I think that helps anxiety quite a bit when you are well informed. And that
Yeah.
also gives you the power back to make decisions that are yours to make, and that are in the driver's seat to be able to make. So I think wherever you're feeling that fear of, but what if this happens? What if that happens? Talk to your provider about that and clear those kind of fill those gaps with what it actually means for you specifically. Google
Mhm.
is great, PubMed is great. You'll get a lot of information from people around you. And I think, as you've been saying this whole time, what it means for you is going to be very different than what it means for somebody else. And so get really clear on that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with clients where on paper, their previous pregnancies were exactly the same and their risk factors for their next pregnancy were exactly the same. But the way they presented and what it meant for their health and their choices was totally different. So get super clear on that. I would say if you have experienced a traumatic birth, the number one thing that I always recommend first is fully and completely acknowledge and admit to yourself that it was a traumatic birth without judgment. And I think that part is always the hardest to do because the world around us will try to erase that. Well, baby was healthy. Well, you're healthy. Well, at least you could get pregnant. Well,
Right.
there's so many messages like that that we internalize, and for better or for worse, intentionally or not, we internalize them. And so then we start minimizing for ourselves. So if you can really fully own without judgment on yourself, that was a traumatic experience for me. And without trying to fix it, you just hold it. You hold it in gentle hands. Go, yes, this is what happened to me. I think it will open up the doors for you to figure out exactly how you need to be supported best going forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And where can everybody find you?
We are best places to go to Ruvelle.com, Ruvelle.com. And there we have our blog, we've got our membership, we've got all our social media channels where we're at the Ruvelle across the board, wherever people are on social media.
Amazing. Thank you again for being here, for supporting the community in the way that you do, and really helping to inform people of their pregnancies and their births, and the support that's out there for them. Thank
Thanks
you
so
so much.
much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.